Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Hispanic Chambers on Values Speaker Series. This is the first of a series of 6 events. We're glad that you are taking the time today to listen and learn about the impacts of dynamic leadership and upstanding character on our business today. I'm really excited to introduce to you today our guest speaker. First, I'd like to acknowledge our title sponsor, Alpha Leak Plumbing and Heat, who is sponsoring this event series of 6. Our event sponsor today is T-Mobile, and we'd like to thank them for providing this opportunity with this live show. And we also would like to acknowledge our partners, J. Billups Creative Media, who is our AV services partner, who is making this show available to us today, and the Colorado Springs Business Journal. I'd like to now introduce a fantastic speaker, Mr. John Register. Have you ever had to overcome a hard time in your life? Do you wish you could create a new normal? Have you wanted to know that you truly make a difference? If you answered yes to any of these 3 questions, you're going to be glad you're here. And if you answered no, you're probably in self-denial. Our speaker today is an overcomer. He is a Gulf War Army veteran, 4-time track and field All-American, and a 2-time Olympic trials qualifier, who suffered a sports career-ending injury, which resulted in the amputation of his left leg. Yet despite a devastating setback, he hurdled his adversity and won the long jump silver medal in Sydney, Australia. Since his injury, he has advised 3 U.S. Secretaries of State on disability foreign policy, been featured on numerous television shows, including PAX, It's a Miracle, The Weekend Today Show, and MSNBC's Morning Blend. He's also founded the United States Olympic Committee's Paralympic Military Sports Program, helping wounded, ill, and injured service members use sport as a tool for their rehabilitation. And most recently, has written a #1 bestseller, 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader. In his spare time, he enjoys punishing his body as he rides his bicycle up the long hills in Colorado, coaching teenagers in track and field, and wearing earplugs as he realms how to play his cello. Today, he is here to help us understand how dynamic leadership and upstanding character impact business during this unique time. Please welcome from Colorado Springs, by way of Chicago, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., San Antonio, and Bitburg, Germany, inspirational speaker, United States Army Gulf War veteran, and homemade waffle lover, our 2000 Paralympic long jump silver medalist, Mr. John Register. Welcome, John.
Hey, thank you, Joe. What a wonderful introduction, and I can't believe it. Another time we are back with the Hispanic Chamber. We were just here maybe about 6 months ago or something, total different situation that we were underneath at that point. And how has this dynamic leadership in this new normal environment really taken off and taken place? And some of the things we were chatting about then is, pushing forward into this space. And I just can't believe how much things have changed and can change and will change in our lives. So when you think about it, everybody that's out there right now, as we get ready to flow on this topic, who comes to mind when you think of a dynamic leader? Who is that person that just wells up and is like, oh, that's the person right there? So if you would, just put that in the chat box. Put that person's name in the chat box. You don't have to put the whole name, but maybe first name, last name, or first name, last initial. But I want to see, I'm going to try to monitor, even though it's a 20-second delay on the Facebook live feed, because I'm on the YouTube feed, because I want to see who is actually in that space. And after you do that, you put that person's name in there. Why? Why does that person come to your mind? What is the adjective that best describes that individual for you. So who is that person, and then why is that person such a great person for you? Just put in the chat box. I'd love to see who you are saying, and I'll take a look over there in a moment. For me, the person that I was thinking about that came up is a woman by the name of Colleen Amstein. Now, Colleen, when I was first injured and separated from the military, I started working for the Army's world-class athlete program underneath the Community and Family Support Center. And it was really a challenging time in that space. Even though I was helping athletes achieve their goals and their dreams of making an Olympic team, an Olympic team, it was really challenging because there was a thing called ethics. And we were moving forward and going really hard, charging. And at one point in time, we had to release some athletes. And that's, if you know anything about athletics, you got to cut somebody, it's the worst feeling in the world. And I had to do it on several occasions. And it's never easy. It never gets easy when you have to let somebody go, especially in the military, and you have to put them back into a military unit. And their dreams are gone. You know you're taking their dreams away from them. So I was told that I had to go release a group of athletes in one particular sport. And their sport said, through their national governing body, they were no longer going to be moving forward towards the Olympic Games. So my supervisor at that time, the leader of the organization, she says, you have to go down to Atlanta and let this group of individuals go. No problem, salute, charge it. I do it. It's not easy. I come back. And the very next week, the national governing body of another organization decided they were going to say the same thing as this other national governing body. And in that moment, I went back into my supervisor's office, said, okay, do you want me to go down here and release these athletes as well? What's the verbiage that you want me to use? And she said, no, we're going to keep them on. So now I'm caught in this quagmire between keeping a group, knowing I've just let them go, fired them, and this other group over here that they want to keep on because there's some type of connection that's there. Ethical dilemma. We're talking about ethics. What would you do in that type of situation? We'd love for you to put that in the chat box. Here's what I did. I said, I'm not going to write that letter unless we can write a letter that says all these other people can come back on, or those individuals have to go off the program just like we did. But I was the one that was going to be on the kind of who shot JR line, right? And I was going to have to take the fall for it. And I refused to do it because of that situation. So I was axed. I was fired. I was let go from that position. And it was traumatic. It hurt. It stung because I knew I was doing a good job. First person ever to put a person on the Olympic team since 1972 that was an Army person in the sport of track and field. It hurt. It stung, doing all that work. And Colleen Amstein was the one who kind of picked me up. I was put off in her division for the Army's Better Opportunity for Single Soldiers program. And what did she do? She empathized. What did she do? She gave me an education in the Army and understanding morale, welfare, and recreation, and how the dollars worked from appropriate to fund dollars and non-appropriate to fund dollars. Then she gave me education in the field. So she took me out and put me in the field after she educated me with schooling. And from there, she did a ride along to make sure I could do this all around the world and lead these BOSS, Better Opportunity for Single Soldiers rejuvenation workshops. And then she put me out in the field because she was grooming me. She was grooming me for her position. How often do we do that as leaders? How often are we grooming the next people to come in and take over for us in that capacity? So it was over a two-year program of what she did for me. So in this dynamic leadership, and we're talking about these dynamic leaders that we have seen, and you put in the chat box there, I'm looking right now, we're talking about, well, I see the thank you for Alpha Elite Plumbing and T-Mobile for sponsoring. Yep. And I guess I haven't seen anybody in the chat. Yeah, I'm looking for the chat still. Come on now. I want to see what you're saying. But in that moment, what happens? What do we do? Leaders have to shift their perspective. Leaders have to shift their perspectives. So in this, as we're learning about how to shift our perspectives and we're talking to embrace this new normal, I want to show you a quick video because we're just not going to do this and not be a talking head, right? Because that's boring. So we have this technology. So why don't we just go out to a park and have this conversation on how leaders have to shift their perspective. So let's go meet John, number 2, over at the park.
In 1996, I had made the Paralympic swim team. Now, the Paralympic Games are for those athletes with physical disabilities and visual impairments. And at those games, while I was swimming and trying to figure out this whole swim thing, I looked at closed circuit television. There was a monitor right in the area. And on this monitor was this gentleman who was on the long jump runway. And this gentleman, he intrigued me. Why? Because he was an above the knee amputee like myself. And I was really intrigued because I was a 27-foot long jumper when I was at the University of Arkansas, and I really wanted to learn how to run and jump again on an artificial limb, but I had never seen it before, didn't even know it was possible. But this gentleman starts taking off down the long jump runway, running leg over leg faster and faster, and he comes to the takeoff board, he hits the board, he leaps up into the air, and at the apex, the height of his flight, his artificial leg flies off. Now, I have never seen this before. So he lands here, and his artificial leg lands about 3 feet up in front of him, and the entire crowd goes dead silent. Remember like the movie Home Alone and Macaulay Culkin? But that long jumper, he turns back to the official and says, "So where are you gonna measure my jump from? From right here, or my artificial leg landed up there?" And I said, oh my gosh, that is such a brilliant attitude to have. Think about that. The attitude that he has to say, I am so comfortable in who I am with all eyes on me, with what just happened, of my leg flying off, I have the wherewithal to go back and ask the official kind of a humorous question. Can we get there? Can we be that way? I began to use this metaphorically in my life to say, you know what, John, you're on the swim team, but you've been a 4-time All-American. You have twice been to the Olympic trials. You have 9 gold medals from armed forces competition. Why are you swimming? You're doing something very excellent, but you're not taking full advantage of who and what your capabilities are. How about you? Let's dialogue about that.
All right. So that's crazy, right? How we can just go right to the park and come right back. You see the ducks in the background? I had a great time with the ducks. They were all trying to get to the camera shot and everything. I love it. So when you look at the long jump and the individual that was on the long jump runway, it was really interesting to me to understand and see that this person shifted my entire mindset around that. So how is your mindset actually shifted? How do you shift your mind around doing something at a very excellent level, and then from there elevating to a different path, a different lane? You see something else that might be there. Think about the environment that we're in right now as a dynamic leader. Are you succumbing to the pressures of what the whole space and the world is going through right now? Or are you really leaning into this moment? And how are you leaning into this moment? That's really the key question. Are you showing up as a leader and leaning in, or are you leaning back? There are some people that have been in my mastermind group, and we have these conversations all the time on how we're going to show up in these moments. So what I've been doing is trying to lean into every single moment, because that's what leaders do. Leaders lean in no matter how difficult it is. I mean, it's tough for me. When I think about all the things and the shifts that we've had to come through, as a professional speaker, I'm doing it like this now, right? With the green screen behind me, I got the 2 monitors going, I got the camera in front of me. You know, I'm going to the park to shoot the videos so that we can have a greater experience together. So as you're thinking about that, how are you showing up right now as that leader? What are you doing? What is the number one thing that you think that you need to have? Are you being empathetic like Colleen was being to me? Are you giving the education still, or are you holding that back? How are you pressing forward in this moment in time? It's a really critical conversation to have, because we all have to show up in this way. I remember and I'm going to look over here on the chat, the most amount of quality. No one is chatting. Come on, everybody. So get in there. So as I'm thinking about the long jump, and I'm thinking about being in the swimming pool, I was doing something at a very high level, but not doing what I need to do at an excellent level on what I was gifted to do. So I think there comes a time where we need to sit down, we need to pause in the moment and begin to look at the skills that we have, what's in the arsenal, and then begin to make the accessory so that we can shift in that moment. And I call this, it's around the new normal mindset. So remember that a lot of people are talking about the new normal, but the new normal really is, it's not a destination. It's only really a plateau to grow. And here's what I mean. That new is no prior point of reference, and normal is the everyday typical occurrence of a thought or an action. As we look inside the new normal, then we are never going to be satisfied with what has been in the past. We can't hang out there. Well, if we do hang out there, we are limiting our progression forward. Now, we can learn from our history, we can learn from our past, but we can't hang out there. You'll hear people say things like, oh, I can't wait till things get back to normal. Well, that's hanging out in your past. That's gone. So when we hear those type of words, we know that people are latching on to those things. As leaders, those are key indicators that people are going back into their basements and they're not trying to come up. And we have to begin to help them turn that corner. Now, the normal is the everyday typical occurrence of a thought, an idea, or an action. So if we're looking at that from the perspective of this new normal and pushing into the space, it has to be a ritual that elevates us to a rhythm, gets us in rhythm, and the rhythm elevates us to a rise, and that pushes us. So new, once again, is no prior point of reference, and normal is the everyday typical occurrence of a thought or an action. And I think when you were talking about this, in this type of context, there's a lot of loss that we felt, and we can hang out there in this as a dynamic leader, even looking backwards and camping out in the old. Loss for me in my company was 2019 was an absolutely banner year. It was absolutely amazing, right? I left the United States Olympic Committee, began speaking on a full-time basis, ended the year by synthesizing and summarizing a major banking institution's leadership course, invited to speak in the United Arab Emirates, came back. The Secretary of State asked me to come in and talk to all the ambassadors on how we shift and create a championship mindset. All of that happened in the span of 1 year, and I was blown away. And then 2020, our vision in 2020 just went. And in that moment, my goals and dreams and everything, they were dashed. I was struggling. I struggled to find my footing again, and I only have 1 foot. I struggled to find the purpose, and I had to go back to my mission statement. I had to go back to my value statement on who I'm going to show up as. And I really looked at that and I said, okay, John, Inspired Communications International, we help people hurdle their adversity, amputate their fear, to embrace a new normal mindset so they can maximize every opportunity. And that's what I began to say. So even if the cash wasn't coming in the door, I could stay clear on my mission, on my vision of what I wanted this company to do every single day. And I began pushing into that space. Have you done that? What were your hopes and dreams in 2020? Put that into the chat box because I want to see what those are. What were your hopes in 2020? And did you have time to grieve them, or are you accelerating? Are you taking off? Is 2020 and a lot of people are getting lost? Are you actually pushing forward in that space? So as we put that in the chat box, we're going to go back out to the park again, and I want to share with you this new normal mindset and where it actually lives, where it comes from in my mindset. So where does the new normal mindset come from? So let's go back out to the park and hear that conversation to you. And as you're going through that, I invite you to write some notes down on how this is impacting you so I can see them in the chat and we can have a dialogue about that when we come back as we get ready to go into the second half of our talk. So let's go back out to the park.
October the 30th, 2000, I'm sitting in a gate waiting area in the San Francisco International Airport. I'm reading a USA Today newspaper. I'm wearing shorts, which has exposed my artificial leg. Boop, boop. In earshot of me, about 20 yards off to my left, your right, two boys about 5 and 7 are talking to their mother, and these two boys have made a new discovery. Mommy, look at that man's leg over there. See that man's leg? Look at that man. There goes Robot Man. So I chuckled. But I went back to reading my USA Today newspaper. Then something else happened. There began to be this outer speak conversation, which really should have remained inner speak conversation, about the two boys, 5 and 7, who had just discovered Robot Man. Shut those kids up. So impolite to stare. Such a bad mother. Leave that poor man alone. I said, wow, now that's interesting. But I went back to reading my USA Today newspaper. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the woman get up and begin to move in my direction. Now, I thought she was going to do like the song said and just walk on by. But no, she stops in front of me, leans in and says, "Excuse me, sir. It looks like you've overcome so much adversity. My children are fascinated by your leg. You're such an inspiration. Would you please tell them what happened?" In that moment, I was taken aback. No one has ever asked me such a direct question in front of all these people, loud enough for them to hear, all the naysayers that were there that were talking this inner speak, outer speak conversation. And in the space between her question and my response, I began to try to figure out how I was going to answer her question. And the space gave me pause. Why did she think I'd overcome so much adversity? Maybe I was just born this way. And why did she think that I was such an inspiration? I could be an axe murderer. I'm not. Yet. And then why was everybody else that had that inner speak conversation, that was now outer speak conversation, leaning in? And in that space between her question and my response, I found my answer. I did not overcome the adversity. You see, 6.5 years earlier, I was lying on a hospital bed in Wichita, Kansas at the Wesley Medical Center. My wife, Alice, was holding on to my left hand. My parents were on the opposite side of the bed, and my son, John Jr., was at the foot of the bed. Dr. Randy Mullins, he walks into the room. He's wearing a white lab coat, stethoscope around his neck, clipboard in his hand. He takes one look at me and sees my countenance, because the pain that I am in is tremendous. And as he looks at me, he says, "John, you have a tough choice to make. You can either keep your leg and you can use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of your life, or I can amputate your leg and you can use a prosthesis for the rest of your life." Now, what kind of choice is that? You see, just 7 days earlier, on May 17th, 1994, I'm on top of the world. I am on the Army's world-class athlete program team. I am a 4-time All-American, twice have been to the Olympic trials. USA Track and Field News has picked me to make the Olympic team one of the favorites to watch for the 1996 games because I'm top 8, top 20 in the world. And I'm doing my shakeout in the 400-meter hurdles. And I'm in Hays, Kansas, and the wind's blowing kind of hard that day, and I'm having trouble with my steps. So on the 400-meter hurdles, which is one time around the track, over 10 barriers spaced 35 meters apart, with a 45-meter lead into the first hurdle and a 40-meter runoff on the last hurdle, I'm approaching each hurdle at the speed of about 8.7 meters per second, which equates to what? If you put in the chat box 19 miles an hour, you'd be absolutely correct if you didn't do a Google search on it. So I'm going pretty fast. Somebody probably said pretty fast out there. So I'm having trouble with my steps. My right leg's coming up, my left leg's coming up. And sometimes in hurdles, as in life, we just want things to stay the same. And I wanted that right leg to come up because that was my dominant leg to go down the backstretch for this hurdle race. So I get in the blocks, and I do my one last proverbial pass. I'm going to shut it down after this one. And I come out of the blocks and I get my steps to the first hurdle. I'm on, right leg leads. Second hurdle, 13 steps in between the hurdle. Again, right leg leading, I'm on again. And then I feel the Kansas wind push against me, but I push back against that Kansas wind. And I realize I'm gonna be short and have to take the hurdle with my left leg. No problem, I'm ambidextrous, I can do that. Don't want to, but I can. So off the right leg I go, across the hurdle with my left leg. When I land, this time I hear and my body sails and twists in the air, and I see my left shin pass in front of my face. My shoulders hit the ground, and I bounce to a halt. I did a quick once over my body, my shoulders are okay, my waist is okay. When I saw my knee, the patella had risen 3 inches up my femur bone, where my left leg was now canted across my right, with my foot touching the black surface of the track. Now let me stick a pin in the story right there and pause for just one moment. I'm going to show you a graphic. And on this graphic, you're going to see the actual injury of my leg, because a sharp lieutenant named Michelle Dickens took 9 pictures that day. And the next picture I'm going to show you is a picture of that injury. But if you're a little bit squeamish, you can look away from your computer monitor right now, wherever you're watching the stream from. So as you can see, on the bottom of the picture is my foot on the black surface of the track. If you come up my shin bone, you will see the dislocation of my knee, the left knee right there. That's not an elbow, ladies and gentlemen, that's my knee. And then when you come all the way down to the bottom left-hand side of the corner, you see my head. My friend Dino's head is resting on my head. My friend Ben Curitin is kind of on there with Dino. Roz is holding my hand, and then I have no idea whose ashy legs those are in the picture. Let me step back onto the track. The only thing I could think about in that moment was just get up. Come on, John, you can do it. It's okay, you got it. You got this. You can get your stuff up. Come on, you can. Oh God! And then 90 minutes later, with my friends singing songs and hymns to keep me calm, 90 minutes later, as they were trying to get me medical attention, 90 minutes later, the ambulance comes. And I'm put in the back and I'm whisked off to Hayes Medical Center, where another doctor in a white lab coat comes in, takes one look at me and says, "Mr. Register, looks like you got a bit of a problem. I'm gonna have to fix that." So he bore down on my crooked leg. We're gonna do this on 3. 1, my leg ballooned up, I passed out, and for the next few days, 7 days, I don't really remember too much what happened. I was medevac to Wesley Medical Center. I underwent several vein graft operations. I don't remember when my wife arrived. I don't remember when my son got there, or my parents. What I do remember is laying in that hospital bed with Alice, her hand on my left hand, my parents on the opposite side of the bed, little John Jr., 5.5 years old, at the foot of the bed, and Dr. Mullen saying, "You got a tough choice to make." Now, it was the pain that spoke first, because my male deductive reasoning said, get rid of the leg, get rid of the pain. So I turned to Dr. Mullins and I said, "I know it has to be amputated," and he went in right away. 2 days later, I woke up at 11 o'clock at night, and I was in more pain than my male deductive reasoning had reasoned. I just wanted something to knock it out. So I saw the morphine drip button on the opposite side of the bed. I just wanted to roll over to press the button, but I was too weak from the surgery to do so. But I saw the nurses station right outside my door, and I thought if I call out to them, but the tubes that have been down my throat make the sound too inaudible to get their attention. So there I lay in my bed for the next 8 hours with my dangerous thoughts. Who am I now? What's my identity? Is my wife gonna stick around? Will my son still see me as his father? Do I still have a job in the Army? Can I support my family? I mean, my Olympic dreams are over. And at 8 o'clock, Dr. Randy Mullins, he walks back in the room, takes one look at me and sees I've done a 180-degree shift. He immediately calls my wife, Alice, who is over at the hotel trying to manage me, herself, John Jr., her mother-in-law. She should have been told I was awakened, but because I couldn't speak and because no one had come in and checked on me, in the moments that I was, in and out of that consciousness, she didn't know. She had been there all the time. On top of that, this saint of a woman has just gotten a call from her employer saying that she's been away from her job too long caring for me, and they've just terminated her position. So she comes running over, and it takes Dr. Mullins and my wife Alice 45 minutes to get me out of that bed, into a wheelchair, wheeled out to an inaccessible playground where I'm parked, forced to watch my wife and my son play on the swing sets, and I couldn't push myself out of that chair. It's the first time I felt devalued, dejected, disabled. And I lost it. Started crying uncontrollably. My wife, Alice, who sees me struggling, she comes running over to me, kneels down beside me and says, "Babe, what is going on? What is wrong?" And I started articulating to her everything that was going on in my life the night before. And then she spoke the words that stopped my downward spiral. "You know what, John? We're going to get through this together. It's just our new normal. It's just our new normal." And when she spoke those words, I remember she baselined my entire existence with those words. And as I started contemplating and thinking about this new normal concept that she was just kind of throwing into my life at this point, John Jr. jumps off the swing, hits the ground, comes running over the little 5.5-year-old legs. "Hey, Dad, you see my big jump? You see my big jump, Dad?" And in those 20 yards, he had just validated me as his father, and he had just created his new normal. And that's exactly what I had to do. I had to create my new normal. Let's take a pause right there and just unpack what we've just heard.
Let's take a breath there for sure. Wow, I know it's an intense story, and I want to honor some of what you all have put in the chat. So as I look back over here on my little pad, Cheyenne said 2020 is a year where I discover the leader that I can be and develop my leadership style. Absolutely, Cheyenne. When tragedy or something happens in our life, we really turn inward and we begin to think, what's my identity? Who am I now? What are my skill sets? How can I embrace this? How can I push forward into this space? It's amazing that we turn our attention there because, yes, it's about maybe protecting ourselves at first, but after that, it's about helping our team. How can I be a better leader, as Cheyenne says? In those moments when I was at the lowest point in my life, I was thinking about those things. What's my identity? And my wife says it's this new normal, right? No prior point of reference that we're going to push in, that every day it can get better. I see Breezy said, ouch, absolutely. Then I see David said, oh my gosh, right. And then another person, I think it was Darian, said, I'm not sure if it's a he or she, but as Darren was saying, pushing into that space, they want to get a new job. Absolutely, because now is a time not to sit back. Now is a time to lean in. But here's what we're going through during this moment. If I can just, I want to really quickly share the screen with you so you can, what my screen is disabled. I gotta get that back. So if is there a way so I can share? Let me see if I get that. All right. Well, if it comes back, I'll come back. The real thing is that we have of what we're understanding in this new normal experience. Is there certain things that we are discovering about ourselves? For me, the first one is this overcoming this stigma. The stigma of, is my wife going to stick around? Is my son still going to see me as his dad? These are all personal stigmas. The second thing really is the overcoming the stigma of others, other people who are believing for me what I can or cannot do, which is really based upon and rooted in what they believe they could or could not do if they were in my situation. So other people pulling us back to who they want us to be for them. That's a tough space. Those can be family members, those could be coworkers, those can be our friends who are trying to pull us back. And we know it by the negative attitudes or the mindset and the words that come from it. Anytime you want to accelerate, they're trying to pull you back into their box. And then finally, societal. Who had I thought about in society? Was it when I watched a Walt Disney movie? I see Captain Hook. Captain Hook's an amputee. He lost his arm, got bit off by Tick-Tock the crocodile, and now I see myself as a villain because in Peter Pan, Captain Hook's the villain. Am I supposed to run away when the young boy in the aisle, the young gal in the aisle looks at me and hides behind their mom's skirt or their dad's trouser legs and says, that person's different, tell me why? And they shush them up and turn them down a different aisle, like, the mother could have done with the two kids. Or is there something else? Is there something else that we can lean into, press into, that's even greater than that? And I think when you look at the individuals, and the others in the culture, that's kind of one bucket. That's our first bucket that we begin in. These fears we have to wrestle with and identify who we are. And as leaders, we go through that process as well. But the second thing is this growth. We all live out here in Colorado. And in the growth aspect of it is, I know that some of you probably have walked the incline. And at the incline, when you get to the top, it's really not the top. It's like a false summit. We get up there and like, oh my gosh, I got more work to do. Usually I get off on Bar Trail and walk down at that point, just being honest. But if you push forward and know this is a false summit, there's also a false summit as we begin this journey through our redefining moment. And that false summit is we think we're rebuilding. I think if I just get it back, if I just get my leg back, everything will be fine. If I just get my life back, everything will be fine. Everything's going to be fine if I can just get it back to the way it used to be. How many people are saying that right now? COVID-19. Let's just get back to normal. How many people are saying that with what's going on with race in America right now and police protection or lack of protection, depending upon where you're falling? And that conversation is spreading out globally. Man, why can't we just get back to normal? When we hear those words, we know that people are on this kind of false summit pathway. They're beginning to shape and redefine themselves to their initial fears, to the fears of others, other people trying to hold them back into their place, or societal impacts. And we know that the status quo will never go without a fight. So as we're fighting against that status quo, we might not be able to change it. Maybe we can. It's tough. We've seen one voice or a series of voices change the cultural mindset of individuals of late. But for the most part, if it doesn't elevate to that level, we're probably not as an individual changing that. So we're redefining ourselves of how we're going to show up in this space as this leader to lead through these moments of challenge and crisis. But it's only until we choose, like I had to choose in that hospital bed when Dr. Mullins came over and said, you got a tough choice to make. You have a tough choice to make as well. You must choose what it is in your life that you are willing to amputate to begin to embrace this new normal mindset that moves you off into freedom, to the opportunity, not seeing the obstacle, but seeing the opportunities that are all around you. And when you make that choice, whether it takes 3 seconds, you do it real quick, 3 days, 3 years, 30 years, when you make that choice, it's painful because you're getting rid of something that has been with you for a long time. And it hurts to let go of an attitude. It hurts to let go of an item sometimes. We hold on these pet rocks in our businesses, in our lives. We can't let go of these past hurts. We live in that past. We have to let that go. We have to amputate it. And the residual effects of amputation, I still have phantom limb sensation and phantom limb pain. Those two things are very real in my mind, but my leg is not there, but I still feel as if the leg is there. And so I have to understand and tell my mind it's gone. That allows me to shift over to the third lane. And the third lane is it's not a rebuild at all. It's actually a rebirth. As an amputee, I had to relearn how to walk. I had to relearn how to run and eventually relearn how to jump, drive a car, show up in society, and understand how people perceive me now that I am in this kind of realm of disability. That is the crust of it, right? Or getting towards the crust, because in that, as we're growing in that process, we become resolved. We become resolute in who we are. We understand that I have overcome this obstacle, and I'm not going to succumb to my friends or society or my family any longer, because I know I have amputated that thing from my life, and I'm living in resolution now. And that resolution says, I'm not going back that way. You need to catch up to where I am. The conversation begins to change in that moment as well. And when we're there, that truly equals our freedom, our liberation. We could have authentic conversations because we could now argue both sides of the coin because we've been on both sides. It's very hard when we are looking at primarily Americans, right? And not having traveled. Most Americans do not own a passport, haven't been outside the United States. It's very hard to have an international conversation with somebody who hasn't left their own state. Yet they have all this knowledge from what they've listened to on television from their favorite news program. That begins to put us back into that mindset that's the individualistic, the fear that we have, because we're dictated to it. We don't learn it for ourselves. So where do we find that truth that we can actually amputate and then begin to embrace this new normal mindset? And once we have that, we're liberated, we're free. The cage is opened. And when the cage is open, we realize when we're free, it's not for us. It's not for me. It's for me to go back and tell somebody else about how to get out of their own mindset, right? So as we look at the individual through the liberation, it runs through the redefining moment. That is the most critical thing that we can do in this time, in this space. So think about that for just a moment, the redefining moment. What does resilience mean to you? Yes, David says it can keep you very short-sighted. Pat D, definitely you have to have an adult to make sure you're there for your loved ones, people to connect with. Yes. Questions coming in. How do you keep your leaders motivated, especially during these challenging times we are experiencing? Great question. If they see you struggling, that's okay, because it makes it human. We have to connect with our authenticity and then lead out from it. If you don't have all the answers, don't pretend that you do have all the answers. As a professional speaker, I stay in my lane. I know about change management, those type of things. I'm not going to go into something like marketing, right? I don't have that expertise. I'm going to call somebody in that has that expertise on the marketing side. So it's staying true to who you are, staying in on those visions, crushing those values, and ensuring that the mission is always moving forward. It might be time to tweak the mission, as we're seeing some other companies right now. Major leaders are trying to change their missions, or not change, but align more, and looking at least with like Black Lives Matter right now. And maybe they were on the side of all lives matter. But in this situation we have right now is, if we make it analogous to a house, all houses matter, but the one that's burning, we want to put the most attention on, right? So they're beginning to shift their statements and to push into the space and to really take a look at who they are. Maybe this is time for you to do the same thing. I'm not talking about just in that space when we're talking about race in our country, but just take a look. Because if your values are not holding up during this time, were they the right values to have there in the first place? So thank you. That was a great question. From Tammy, what are the steps we should take as a leader to have rational discussions with others who have different perspectives, to find common ground and find solutions? Yes, great, Tammy. As leaders, having rational discussions, number one, we have to be versed in it ourselves. We have to educate ourselves in it. And if we don't know, then bring somebody in who is skilled in that area. Folks are running and jumping in on the diversity and inclusion bandwagon right now. And if they weren't in the D&I space before all this happened, I would question why you're bringing them in right now for the conversation. Same thing with everything else that is going on in the community. have those conversations. I'm sorry, excuse me. And have those conversations at the highest levels, and then really make change. We're talking about a little earlier with my friend Kevin Carroll on LinkedIn Live. We just did one over there, and we had this conversation right now on the relentlessness that you have to have in pursuits. Well, we're looking at companies that are doing this right now, but also where are you going to be 5 years from now? What's the goal? What's the plan? Or are you just doing it for the moment? And this is not a moment. It's a movement. It's a movement not just with race in America. It's a movement with COVID. It's a movement with all these things are crushing on us. But how are we going to show up? What are our values saying to us? And how are we going to move forward in that? I'd love to have a more dialogue on that. What can you do as a community, as minority leaders, to get our community to have better understanding of inclusion? It's showing up at the polls. It is making voices heard at town hall meetings. I was so amazed and honored by my daughter. And we had real talk, #real talk conversation, because she was one that went up to Denver leading the protest, the first peaceful protest they had. She went up there and was a co-organizer of this thing. And when I put the dad hat on, I was like, I don't want you going up there, because they've had three nights of, escalation. And understanding in our conversation of what she was trying to do, I had to let her voice be heard. I could not squelch that voice. I had to. It's in her genes. It's in her blood. My family's always been engaged in civil rights. My uncle was in charge of the March on Washington with all the platform speakers, last person to see Medgar Evers alive. And they've always, to answer the question, is engaging, no matter how difficult it is, with the hard conversations to change. And that is digging in the trenches. And that's not, however you show up in that space, like there are many members of a basketball team or a football team or a soccer team or a softball team, it doesn't matter all the members, each one has a role. So one, it might be advocacy, one might be activism, one might be pushing the pervasive demand. All these things kind of push together for us to have this voice, but the voice has to be unified and directed in one movement. It's to turn the conversation always, when anybody tries to skirt it and put it outside the lines and try to hijack the conversation and say that we'll take the George Floyd matter, because that's most pressing right now, and saying that, okay, so we have protesters. Oh, well, the protesters, they got violent and they're starting to loot and they're starting to build fires. No, let's keep things in the proper bucket. Protesters are not looters. Looters are thieves. Those are two different things. So why were they looting? Oh, because it was a protest. Well, why was it a protest? Because it was a black man that was murdered on the streets of Minneapolis. Well, who murdered that black man? Oh, the police department. So now we have to put this conversation square back in the hole of where it belongs. And that's how you begin to shift conversations and never let it up. It's a relentless press and pursuit. So that's how you do it as leaders. So I want to move into, and I'll come back on some of these questions in a second, is in this resilience that we have to have as leaders, this resilience that is there. And if you look at the word resilience, just like I shared with you in the hurdles, that there are 10 letters in the word resilience, just like there are 10 barriers in the hurdle race. But when the starter says and calls us to a line, or calls the group to the line, the starter or the announcer will say, quiet for the start. And if you look inside the word resilience, embedded in that word is the word silence. And we have to begin to hear our own voice. COVID-19 sure has done that. I can't even see any contrails in the sky from planes any longer flying overhead. I saw one yesterday because we're silenced. No one's going to soccer practice anymore. For the most part, we're slowly starting to open back up. No one's going to baseball practice. No one's going anywhere that's kind of really concerts or social gathering in the masses, in pockets. I mean, outside of protests and those type of things, inside of people going to the beach. But we're starting to see spikes in some areas. As a leader, what happens if we begin to spike? What are you going to do? Because I think people are going to break if we have to go back in. I think they're going to break, and you can't break. You have to get yourself out in front of it. And that's the resilience. That's the silence of what you listen to. We got a great space around here where we can get out in Colorado and a place by ourselves to think and walk wherever that space is for you. You have to take advantage of it, because you're the leader. You have to press into this. You have to lean in. You cannot lean back and let other people do it for you. That's not who you are. You are the ones who lean in. So I had to lean in. And in my mindset and take on this work, the mindset takes a strong belief that all's going to be okay. The mindset is you got to put in the work to maximize each opportunity. You have to focus on the mission statement or the vision statements. With income, it's not all about just, kind of just driving. Mind and inspired communications is that we got to help the clients hurdle their adversity, right? That's what I'm driving at all the time to keep me focused in. And it's tough. It is hard. There's some days I just do not want to do it. But same thing when I was an athlete trying to make the Paralympic team on this case. I had to get up when I didn't want to. I had to train when it was inconvenient. And I had to push into that space to lead so I can give myself the best opportunity, the best advantage. So let's go back out to the park one last time and let's see what happened at the end of the story. Because you know what? After the silence is there and after we get resilience, we can actually push into those spaces. So back out to the park and let's see how the story actually ends.
So the new normal is really about no prior point of reference. That's what new is, that we're not going to hold on to our past performances, our past successes, our past failures. That's gone. And normal is the everyday typical occurrence of a thought, idea, or an action. And so when we're talking about the new normal, it's how are you pivoting? What are you doing right now to increase to the next level? I took the new normal philosophy and began swimming for physical therapy. I got so fast in the water that I somehow fluked up, messed up, and made the Paralympic swim team. So instead of going to the Olympic Games as a 400-meter hurdler, I went to the Paralympic Games as a swimmer, African-American swimmer. In my book, we just didn't do that sport too much. And it was at those games that I saw athletes running and jumping on artificial limbs, and that birthed the idea of how I could press more into this new normal, right? It's because it's not a destination, it's only a plateau to grow. So I had a leg made for running. And after 4 years, learning how to run, learning how to jump, getting myself fit and fast, I wound up making the Paralympic team, and I went to Sydney, Australia, and these were the results.
Let's take a look at the men's long jump F42 final starting list, and Lucas Christen from Switzerland is the dominant one in this field. He holds both the world and Paralympic record in this event. Victor Goriansen from Sweden is up now, ready for his third attempt. It's not a bad effort. He's pretty satisfied with it. 4.89. It's actually a season best for the Swede. Here's the man to beat. He is the world record holder, jumping 5.43 in 98 in Birmingham. Well, he's pleased the crowd. He's happy with that one. And so he should be. He's smashed his world mark with 5.57, a new world mark. Well, the pressure's really on now for John Register from the USA. 5.57, the mark to beat. Nice lead up, but it's short. He's not able to take the gold from Christen, but he does move into second spot. So here are the results of the men's long jump final. Gold to Christen, silver to Register, and Goriansen home with the bronze.
All right, woohoo, we're back. How was that? So it always ends well. We have to have it end on top. The interesting thing is that every time I see that video and I see the jump, I really think I'm going to win the gold medal. Missed it again, but silver's not that bad, right? And some people say that, oh, you didn't win gold, you won silver, but you lost the gold. No, I don't look at it that way. And I think that's the whole mindset shift of it all as well. How we look at things. Because if I believe I earned something that I had, if I believe I deserve something I had not yet earned, then that's entitlement. That's in its truest form. What happened after that long jump was a woman who recognized me she's a reporter, recognized me from when I ran track and field at the University of Arkansas. And she said, John, you've run against Carl Lewis. You jumped against Carl Lewis. You ran against Michael Johnson. Do you think with artificial limb technology that you could do that again and compete with those gentlemen? And my response to her was, no, I don't think I could. However, if Michael Johnson or Carl Lewis, God forbid, lost a leg, could they run as fast or jump as far as I do? And that's the language of the catch-up. That's the language that we all must have in order to push into those spaces, right? Because it is challenging, it is tough. And as dynamic leaders who are embracing this new normal mindset, we have to be in those spaces. So I'm going to go back and answer a few of the questions I saw in that chat. I love that you put that in the chat box there, and then we'll close out the conversation. One I saw, which I loved, was a question that came in from the Hispanic Business Council. I think it's coming from the T-Mobile folks. And how do you keep your leaders motivated? So yeah, that's hard, right? And how have you found respite? I think one critical thing I found in sports, when I was in the military, when I was practicing my cello, the most important time is not so much the practice and doing the event. The most important time is the recovery. Are we giving our leaders enough space and grace to articulate what's going on with them? That is critical. And we need that space, because if you've ever tried to get in a boardroom and you're trying to find the solution, and you're all trying to find the solution, you're whiteboarding it out, how hard is that? It usually comes really tough, and you're looking at your watch and your clock, and you're trying to figure out how much time do we have? I got my next meeting that's coming up. But those moments of brilliance actually happen in times of respite. When I do my walk in the morning around the neighborhood of Spring Creek here, I have my phone with me. And if I have an idea, it goes right into my phone. I send an email right to myself so I can follow up on that idea. And that's where the brilliance begins to come out. And we have to give our leaders that space to do that. And that then in turn keeps them motivated, because they feel like they're part of the solution and not just being waited on to make the next sale. It's really critical, I think, to do that. What do you think the virtues are needed as a small business owner to navigate the business world and ensure you successfully emerge on the other side of this unique time? I think one of the things that we can do is to stop saying the word uncertain. We know these are uncertain times, uncertainty, but that puts us back in a state of fear because we don't have control. And when we don't have control, we begin to be uncertain, and we do irrational things because of that, like buy toilet paper on the run, and you can't get any toilet paper on the shelves because we do. That's something that we think that we can control. At least I can control my own bowel stuff, right? I want to buy all that toilet paper. So get rid of those words out of the vernacular and begin to understand what are the things that are certain. What do we know right now? What is it right now about today that we can actually impact? Are we going to be aligned towards the vision and the values that we have and the mission that we have? Or are we going to succumb to our fears? We cannot stay on that fear side. We cannot keep saying the good old days, because those days are gone. What is next? Begin to look at other industries. How are they coming through this? I saw a great industry within Southwest Airlines, and they're trying to survive. Just like many others are as well. What's Gary Kelly, the CEO, saying? How are they pivoting? How are they shifting? He's in constant communication with his employees. Constant. Every 2 to 3 days, he's got a video going out telling them what is coming up next, what's happening. Can you go on voluntary furlough? We're trying to save this company. He is out there in front communicating all the time. Are you communicating to your people all the time? They need to hear your voice so they can actually execute. One more, let's see if we'll take this. Pat had a great point. Somebody said Pat had a great point. One of the banners we had about JDP was pertinent to my opinion. When you care, you win. Yes, absolutely. The whole world needs people to care nowadays, and hopefully that's something that will stick with us. Absolutely. That's a legacy. What is the legacy? How are people going to remember you when you come out of this? Wherever that endpoint is, how are they going to remember you? Were you a leader? Did you lean in, or were you leaning back, waiting for other people others to lead? I have a lot of speaker friends that are around that they're checked out. You know, they're motivational speakers who are not motivating. Unmotivating motivational speakers. I don't get it. We have to lean into those moments. So thank you for those questions. I will try to get to them, and I'll go back and watch it on YouTube again and try to answer some in the chat. You can always reach out to me on john@johnregister.com. But let me finish up our conversation. So here's some things that I learned. One of the things I learned was the woman that was in the gate waiting area who came up with the 2 kids. What risk she took. Amazing risk she took to come up to somebody that she did not know and dialogue and have this conversation and encourage her 2 young kids. So her one action changed the entire language of the people who were in the gate waiting area. They started saying, how cool is that? Those kids' lives will never be the same. That's an amazing, do you hear that amazing story? And I thought about that from my perspective. How many times did I miss it because I was reading my own proverbial newspapers? That I wasn't engaged. I was checked out. I began to see the picture different. The picture of what you saw when I was laying on the track, instead of seeing myself in agonizing pain, I began to see the support structure that was around me, the amazing support that took to help me during this time in my life. My wife and I, Alice, we've now been married 31 years. Our son, John Jr. is 31 years old. Our daughter is now 23. And we have a daughter now because when I was in the hospital, I had all those fears. We have a daughter because, everything still worked. That was bad. Okay. And then finally, my son has a daughter of his own. And I'm her fafa. I have a granddaughter, and she's up kind of banging on the door right now, trying to come in here. And I love it because life does move on. Despite the things that happen, they're now past experience that I can put back into my arsenal for times like these to pull upon, because they've made me resolved. They've made me more resilient. And in this moment, that's what we have to do as leaders. We have to lean in to the things that are most critical, to the things that we hold most dearly, most in trust, because each one of you are inspirations. Inspirations are catalysts. Catalysts to what? They're catalysts to motivation. Motivation in turn causes actions. Actions lead us to transformational results, and these results, they re-inspire us, or they allow other people that are watching the process to catch the vision. So I hope that this conversation has been great for you as it was for me. Again, if you want to connect with me, I have it's john@johnregister.com. I have a book out now that was in the opening. It's 10 power stories to impact any leader. So you read 10 stories of mine, and I have some questions for you so you can journal it. And then you have your own 10 power stories that when you come in times of crisis, you can lead with your own stories. The other thing I'm doing right now is I have a course. I just put it together. I'm really excited about it. I don't even know how to even market the thing. That's what I tell you. I got to get marketers to come do it. But it's out right now. If you go to my website, johnregister.com, you'll see it on the kind of shopping cart list there. And it's Hurdling Adversity. I got 5 nights, Thursday night, 7 o'clock to 8:15, that we're going to have these conversations around hurdling adversity and what's the process? How do we actually do it? What's the nuggets? How do we go from fear to freedom, learned optimism to owner mindset, and some of the stuff that Dr. Martin Seligman talks about. So that's going to be a great conversation, some really good dialogue. Can't wait for you all to be there. And with that, I say to you, go forth, inspire your world. And go is your command. Forth is your direction. Inspire, that is your vocation. World, because it's personal only to you. Only you can do it. And world, because this is your sphere of influence. Thank you so much. And back to you, Joe, in the studio.
Thanks, John, for that inspiring message. Always a pleasure to be able to listen to you. To all of our guests that attended the show, we hope you got some meaningful information out of this. This is only the first of several events that we're doing in this new virtual world that we're operating in. So we hope you tune in to our YouTube channel and take advantage of these opportunities. Our next event, it will be on Friday, tomorrow night, as we lay back, enjoy, and wind down from the work week. We're going to have a live stream show featuring a national smooth jazz recording artist, Tony Exum Jr., from 7 to 8 p.m. on Friday night. And that's tomorrow, so you still can register for that event. And also, our second edition of our On Value Speaker Series will be on July 16th, and we will feature DJ Vanis, who will have another inspiring message for us on leadership and character and its impact on business. But we appreciate our sponsor today for the event, T-Mobile, and our title sponsor for the series, Alpha Elite Plumbing and Heat. So thank you for allowing us to provide this live stream show to you today, and we hope you enjoyed the rest of the week and have a great weekend ahead for all of you. Thanks for attending. We appreciate it.